On this episode, the agricultural industry is concerned with dicamba lawsuits piling up after the Bader Peach Farm's verdict has now set precedents. Weed resistance is a big deal. University weed scientists put out a couple of recent articles voicing their concerns. Hear what Ben and Tommy have to say about them. Gene Payne from the Illinois Fertilizer Chemical Association has more to say. Hear Tommy talk about her thoughts in this episode.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman, and welcome to Cup of Joe, episode number 31, season 2. What a week. Lots of things going on, and one of the things we want to do today is just kind of talk about some of the things. We don't want to beat a dead horse to death, but we got some things that we think that farmers need to understand and maybe step back and think about. So we'll start off with turk today, and then we'll go into this discussion.
We've had a lot of conversation. We've had a week or two to digest kind of what's happened in the peach dicamba trial and
The Bader Peach Tree.
the Bader
farm.
Peach Tree thing, and how does that affect the industry, and how does that affect everything that's going on? And that's just the first round of what the industry is about to witness, because the next one up, or the next thing that's going to happen, is the soybean dicamba drift trials are going to start being heard.
Turk, in case anybody hasn't watched our last couple episodes, why is the Bader Peach Tree Farm, where the dicamba drifted over and what killed this, basically an orchard, or damaged an orchard? Damaged the orchard is the correct way to say it. Why is that so significant? It's because of the dollar numbers, right?
There was $15 million awarded for damages and $250 million awarded for punitive damages.
Yeah, punitive damage would be like kind of what some people call pain and suffering and whatever it is. It's basically things that you can't really touch. Physical damages are, well, there's so many trees, each tree's worth so much, and that type of thing. But that in this industry, this was a shocker, wasn't it?
It was a shocker, and I really doubt whether in the end the judge will. I think the judge will reduce that punitive damage to somewhat. I know there are limitations within the court system to on how much can be awarded, and I think it will be reduced, but it's still going to be a big number in the end. The
precedent was
set. Precedent was set, and the precedent was set because of the way the registration was obtained to start with, and that's why they were awarded. The jury was just upset about how it went about getting the registration to start with for the product that they knew that it was documented in the court case that they knew was going to cause damages before they even started down this road. And so that's really why the jury was so upset and why the big award. As we get into the soybeans.
Yeah, so that brings us to where we're at today for next year. I mean, we got a bunch of farmers getting ready to plant various traits, and one of them is dicamba out there. So what has changed? And one of the things that just shocks me is that we went to the Land Expo conference in Des Moines, and one of the speakers up there says that there's an annual convention of attorneys that specialize in class action lawsuits, and they sit down as a group and determine who their next target is.
Yeah.
And the United States is the only country in the world that has so much litigation. I mean, we were just litigation crazy. So this precedent is going to change off-target movement this year, it appears, and there's already evidence oozing out to talk about that.
Well, would we go from 700 cases to over 2,000 cases, like in just a few days, on lawsuits that have been filed on soybean lawsuits for drift problems.
Successful Farming reported this week that there's a potential 2,000 lawsuits just on neighbor-to-neighbor type off-target movements type things, which again, that information was put out by a law firm So just keep that in mind. They're trying to probably stir the
Pump
pot
up,
a little
pump
bit.
up some business.
Here on Crop Life, Joe, Gene Payne has said that in Illinois, says it's the #1 soybean producing state right now. It says that their claims have been doubling each year over the past 3 years, and they have reached 724 confirmed complaints in 2019. But that's only with 70% in right now because they're so backlogged from last year.
That number's, I don't know what the number really is because there's so many people that just said it isn't going to do any good, turn it in.
Right.
So
Or
they
neighbors
didn't-
taking care of it
What-
Across the
themselves.
fence, yeah.
Yep.
Whatever. It's just bad for the industry, and I guess that's what I want to focus on a little bit is how does this affect everybody and everything with all the lawsuits that are coming and all the publicity that's going to surround them. It's going to be even bigger than the Peach trial, in my opinion. I mean, that was a big trial because it was the first and documented and precedented and tried and
So
done.
everybody's going to be under the microscope this year.
Everybody's going to be under the microscope, and it just brings a lot of negative attention to the ag community in general. It's not the kind of attention we want. We want attention to be how good stewards of the land we are, how good we are at producing crops, and how we're basically the world's leader in being first at everything. Well, right now we're first in litigations, and we're first in negative things, and that's not good for anybody.
No, I agree. I'm really worried this year that the rules have changed. In the past, when we had a little bit of off-target movement, like I said, two farmers would lean across the fence. Now we're going to have these class action lawsuit guys out there. You'll see the ads running. It'll happen sooner than later. You'll start seeing on TV, just like the glyphosate ads, join our lawsuit, and then the consumers and all the people, they're just going to start. I mean, if a farmer goes down the road and drops an ounce of chemical on the highway, they're going to claim that they damaged something, and this is really bad. I mean, I can't think of anything worse that could happen to our industry. We're already being challenged enough, but we're really going to be challenged this year. So I guess what we really want to say is step back a little bit and think about your decision and make sure that you're protecting yourself, because it is true that if you do something that you know is inherently dangerous, in other words, if I hire somebody to do something that you know is inherently dangerous, and that person harms somebody, it can go all the way back to the farmer who hired the applicator. And again, of course, the person on the other end's got to prove that this was inherently dangerous. Obviously, we got a precedent.
We have a precedent now.
So the liability is like a spider web. It's just going to go out in a lot of directions.
Do you guys think that this is just a result of, we've been dealing with this for 3-4 years now. There has really been no policing of it, especially in some parts of Missouri where we've heard that, the
no inspectors, yeah.
No inspectors, or
not enough staff,
or they're
not
getting
enough budget,
or they're getting threatened even. And now that the only way that a non-Dicamba or Extend soybean user, the only way he can get his word across or their word across is to file a lawsuit.
Well, litigation seems to be, it starts at the companies. I mean, I can tell you, just in the process of bringing Enlist E3 to the market, there was litigation that we were involved in, and MS Tech was, and it used to be people would sit down across the table and work something out, right. But now they do it in courtrooms.
Well, the fact that what we're talking about here is all the different cases and all the costs that's associated. I mean, that's a hidden cost to society in general. All taxpayers are paying for those costs in one fashion or another. No matter who, what, when, or where, anybody that's paying taxes that's gonna come out of somebody's pocket somewhere as the cost that this is creating for society in general.
Yeah. And then it's going to go all the way down to other products too, including ours. The Enlist 1, the 2,4-D, and Liberty products. I mean, if anybody's spraying off label a little bit, pushing the envelope a little bit, which happens because of environmental, if it's raining all the time, everybody's going to be under the microscope, and this is really bad. And I know, Ben, you've got a lot of notes on this thing, and then we have the whole weed resistance issue. If we keep doing the same thing over and over again, and expect a different result when it comes to managing resistant weeds. It doesn't work. I know we had Stephen Powell here back in 2008. Dr. Stephen Powell is from Australia. Australia has the most weed resistance of any country in the world. And he told us back in 2008, he says, he stood up there, I'll never forget, he says, we are #1 in weed resistance. And he says, guess what? The United States is going to pass us up, and you guys are going to be #1 unless you change your methods of controlling weeds. And he said, the best way to manage resistant weeds was never to see them. So Ben, what do you have today to add to this discussion about the predicament we're in right now with weed resistance and off-target movement and scrutiny and just too much litigation?
Right. So Dr. Norsworthy and Dr. Steckel, they have reports here from the Progressive Farmer on the 27th of February. So if you want to look up that article, go ahead and look it up in our audience. But they're both saying how they've taken seeds off of their water hemp plants, they've grown them, and now they're in the stages of testing, and they're reporting on what they're finding from their testing, and a full rate of Dicamba Extendamax sprayed over the top of these palmer amaranth plants that they pulled seeds off of last fall are failing to control these palmer amaranth plants. So they're not calling it full resistance built up into that point. They still have to do higher rates, and they have to do some procedural things to be able to call these populations completely resistant. But they do have populations that they are testing that they have certain populations where dicamba will kill it 100%, and then they have certain populations where the weeds will turn and roll over like they do when you spray them with dicamba, and they'll pop back up in 5 days. No harm done. So
wow.
They're only getting 50% kill on this one population. So
this is basically in Missouri, or pardon me, it'd be
Steckel
Arkansas and
Tennessee.
Arkansas
Yep.
and Tennessee.
So, and they don't leave the 2,4-D component alone from this, because there are 2,4-D resistant water hemp species that exist. So they're not saying that the Enlist product is the silver bullet that's going to take care of it. And then kind of my add-in to this article is that you want to be using full rates, and with Enlist 1 that's 2 pints per acre, and with Enlist Duo that's 4.75 pints per acre. But I don't even suggest the using the Enlist Duo when you're in a situation where you have glyphosate resistant weeds, especially down in Steckel and Dr. Norsworthy's world. I mean, you're going to be using the 2 pints of Enlist 1. You're going to be using the full rate of Liberty, which is 43 ounces, Liberty or Interline. And if you have to, you have the ability to spray that twice to manage the weeds that you have. So both of those products are allowed.
You want those two effective modes. You want that Liberty piece, and you want that 2,4-D piece to basically really confuse that weed.
Exactly. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have a heavy residual in with your first post to try to, except to be a group 15 or maybe a group, they could have a PPO in there which has a little bit of residual to it. So group 14. So you're going to want the residual laced in, so then those weeds that you killed, they're not going to be popping back up until the canopy happens.
Then if you really, really want to do a good job, any of them that you miss, go out and walk out and pull them, right?
I think
like I used to do with my grandfather days.
Exactly.
That's why we didn't have resistant weeds back then, because if we saw one, we pulled one.
But they also talked about metribuzin and how effective it is when you put that in the mix as well. It enhances everything.
Right, and that adds a little bit of residual as well.
Yeah, so I think that's important to not overlook as well. So what's different about Tennessee and Arkansas that they're having these? We're seeing this. Is it because of cotton down there, and they've been spraying dicamba on cotton for a couple years longer than soybeans?
That goes into play. And also cotton doesn't close rows because it's grown on 38-inch hemps, so you never have complete canopy. So where we get away with one post application in cotton, most of the time they're using 2 to 3 post applications, and you're constantly hitting those weeds with the same chemicals over and over and over again. That plays a certain part of it, but I also think that their growing conditions are warmer, their weeds grow faster. There's more herbicide breakdown in their residuals because of the heat. They're just working in a little bit different environment, and that's why we.
But the lesson learned is those are leading indicators.
Correct.
In other words, what happens down there will eventually happen here. Just takes a little bit more time.
Yep. Give it 5-6 years.
So a smart farmer would pay attention to what's going on down there and immediately change his tactics up here to protect his farm for the future, as opposed to, it's kind of like fixing the fence before the cow gets out, not after the cow gets out.
Right. So I highly encourage, there's some really, really smart farmers that work in our circle around here within a 50-mile circle that are already going to be using Enlist One and Liberty, and they don't care that it's an extra $8-9 an acre. They want to make sure that they steward the technology properly, and I give them a hats off for doing
it's really
that.
all about controlling that weed bank, because if you can keep those numbers low to start with, and you don't have the weed buildup and the weed population to start with, it's a lot easier to kill 90% of 100 than it is 90% of 1,000,000.
Sure, that's a good point.
Well, Tommy, you got anything else that you would want to talk about this?
I want to add a couple tidbits. I was reading here, it's a new era in weed management by Gil Gullickson here, and he was also talking about how Nebraska is having some dicamba weed resistance issues too. So, put that into the play as well. And I wanted to note that glufosinate doesn't have any major restrictions as far as weed resistance. That's been no case yet.
Yeah.
We keep using it like we are. We're going to go down that road like we've seen Pursuit and glyphosate. But anyway, they outlined four things to be kind of, to work with weed resistance is have a plan B. With these regulations of extends soybeans or dicamba usage, with last year we had obviously a rainy year in a lot of areas, so past the deadline where you could apply dicamba, it was already past that, so a lot of guys use glyphosate where some of them had some misses, but some of them had some success too as well. So a lot of farmers saw that there's some other options. Rotate herbicide tolerant traits. We got LLGT27 and List D3. There is Extend beans out there. There are straight Liberty beans out there.
And
too.
the Elite 27 in the counties where it's approved, which is another mode of action.
They made another good thing here. It says, take a lesson from organic farmers. Without herbicide, organic farmers have to devise alternative ways to manage weeds. And, with cover crops or these other things, they're just think outside the box. Then also watch new trends. This won't immediately help you, but watching new technologies and learning it for the future and see what's going on, that's going to help be a part of how we're going to combat weed resistance in the future. So we don't have to wait for a 5-way stack and hopefully not ruin that when that comes on by actively pursuing and applying chemicals. So
Well, Stephen Powell said it best, I think, when the researcher considered #1 weed scientist from Australia. He said, when it comes to weeds, if it's working, change it. And that is so hard for any of us to do. We're all creatures of habit. In other words, if we have our weed control perfect, so I'm going to use that again next year. In essence, we're starting the selection process.
Right.
In other words, every chemical out there will eventually wear out because of a selection process. So the speed is determined by how many times you keep using the same thing. But if you can mix other herbicides in it, like you suggested, Ben, you can slow that process down. Before we got started the filming this morning, we talked about, technically speaking, from when you're born, the day you're born, you're dying, because every day you're getting closer to death. And it's a little bit analogy would be that the first day you use that herbicide, you're starting the selection process for resistance.
on this article too, Joe, I wanted to, one more note was from Jean Payne here, was she was really concerned about how all of this is coming down on the applicator, even in the ag retail side, and she's really trying to stand up for them, because if there's science backing behind it that it moves, you know, that's not right to blame it on the applicator. And
yeah, she's the president of the Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association.
Correct.
Which represents all the applicators out there in the state of Illinois. And I know exactly what you're saying, Tommy. She has been real advocate of saying, you know, our applicators been applicating, many of them, for 30 or 40 years. How come all of a sudden one day we wake up and they don't know what the heck they're doing?
Yep.
And we all know that we got some really, really good applicators out there.
She stated here, before Dicamba came on the market, they had 100 claims of off-target movement or whatever it may be.
In a single year.
In the last 20 years.
20 years.
20 years.
So everybody forgot how to spray, huh?
Yeah.
No.
So I think
Something changed.
bottom line is, you know, Mershman Seeds talk to your sales manager, because we have sustainable solutions that I think that all farmers can utilize and manage weeds for a long time coming. If we just we can help you come up with a program for sure.
And again, the take home as we wrap this thing up is it's different this year than last year. It's not business as usual. There's precedents set out there. These class action lawsuit attorneys are getting fired up to go after this problem. They see another cash cow. It is a terrible thing for this to happen to our industry, and it's going to cost all of us in the long run options and the way we do business. And we just implore our listeners and people who are watching today to step back and think about how they're managing their weeds and to be proactive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and if we can, I mean, if any of you have been through litigation, it is one of the most stressful, painful things that you can possibly go through. I mean, it's worse than a drought, and it's worse than not getting your crop planted, and that's a lot of stress. So it's something to be proactive about and not wait till it's too late. Yeah. And again, yes, we just happen to have some options that we think are better, but whatever it is you do it right, and make sure you document things and do things the way you're supposed to, because the technology has been proven, the dicamba technology has been proven to be flawed. I mean, as far as in certain conditions, it will volatilize, it will damage, and again, 1/10,000th of an ounce will damage 1 acre. That's the, if you opened up your pop can or beer can or whatever it is and you hear that poof, that's 1/10,000th of an ounce, and that will damage 1 acre of soybeans.
Wow.
So you can't get it out of your sprayers. It doesn't take much. Soybeans are the most sensitive plant to dicamba that's out there right now. Well,
Take us home with the joke of the day.
yeah,
Joe.
well, we got to go somewhere else besides this, that's for sure. Well, the joke of the day, as you know, we're trying to do something as we talk about our problems and hopefully solutions too on these episodes. The joke of the day, I really didn't have one today, but thanks to Mike Wilson, one of our dealers, he texted me one in, so maybe this is the only reason they watch the show. And it was Captain Hook. Where did he get his hook from? Captain Hook, where did he get his hook from? A secondhand store. Well, hopefully not too depressing today. We'll try to be more optimistic next week, but it's our job to help the profitability of farmers and to make sure that you're thinking about all the options, and then you can go back, do your own research, and conclude for yourself what is best for your farm. But we would love to help you make those decisions, and as always, thank you for your business. We hope that you be safe, and don't. We have in the last few weeks, my dead skunk thing, that we talked about a year ago. When you see your first dead skunk in the middle of the road, that usually means you're going to be planting corn in 6 weeks. We've been seeing that the last couple of weeks. And down south, 39 years, earliest spring in 39 years down in the southern, as you head towards the Gulf Coast and everything. So I think we're going to have an early spring. So get your seed, get ready to plant. See you next week. Thank you.